You are live. The best part of the show. That is the best part of the show. You are live. Today we are talking China's tobacco monopoly, 2.4 trillion cigarettes sold a year. That is nearly half of all cigarettes sold on Earth. China has about 1.4 billion people. India has about 1.5. So India is now slightly larger than China by population, but China still dominates the world in cigarettes. China has more than 300 million smokers. India has about 270 million smokers, but that number includes smokeless tobacco. For smoked tobacco, India is closer to about 100 million people. Now that difference matters because in China, cigarettes are the core product. In India, tobacco is split between smoked tobacco and smokeless tobacco, things like kani, gutka, betel quid with tobacco, and zarda. I often see people in my own area here in Jackson Heights chewing on the stuff. So when we compare India and China, the first question is not just how many people use tobacco. The better question is what kind of tobacco are they using and what system profits from it. China's system is unique because the state is not only regulating cigarettes, the state is selling them. China National Tobacco Corporation is the state tobacco monopoly. It makes most of the cigarettes. It is tied directly to the government, and the government makes enormous money from it. China's tobacco monopoly generated about 244 billion in profit and tax revenue in 2025. That is roughly 7% of national government revenue. That is close to what China officially says it spends on defense. So the question becomes, how aggressively can a government fight smoking when the government is also making hundreds of billions of dollars from cigarettes? That is the contradiction. Do they care about public health? Well, the public health goal says fewer. The public health goal says fewer cigarettes. The government revenue model says keep the machine running. Cigarette sales are falling in most countries. In China, they are rising. From 2003 to 2023, cigarette sales in China rose about 40%. In the rest of the world, China's cigarette sales fell about 25%. That is the global split. The world is slowly moving away from cigarettes. China is selling more. The price explains part of it. A pack of cigarettes in China costs roughly $3. In New York City, a pack of Marlboro Reds can cost around $20. That changes behavior. Price is one of the strongest anti-smoking tools in the world, and it serves as a very effective deterrent here in the United States. If cigarettes are expensive, people smoke less. If cigarettes are cheap, the habit is easier to keep. So when China keeps cigarettes cheap, the question is not just health, the question is policy. Is the government trying to reduce smoking, or is the government protecting a revenue stream? Now compare that to the United States. In America, adult cigarette smoking has fallen from about 42% in the mid-1960s to about 12% today. That is a massive cultural change. In 1965, more than 4 in 10 American adults smoked. Today it is closer to 1 in 9. That shift started with a major public health turning point. In 1964, the US Surgeon General released the landmark report on smoking and health. That report linked cigarette smoking to lung cancer and other serious disease. After that came the warning labels, advertising restrictions, public health campaigns, indoor smoking bans, higher taxes, lawsuits, and decades of cultural pressure. Smoking didn't just disappear in America overnight, but the social meaning changed. Smoking went from glamorous to dangerous. It went from normal to restricted. It went from everyone does it to why are you still doing that? As a matter of fact, it is disgusting. I myself have tried cigarettes in the past. Yes, it can be something social. That's how you kind of ease yourself into it. It is absolutely disgusting what it does to your lungs, the phlegm it creates. Yes, why are you still smoking? And that goes for weed as well. Weed is still smoking. We will be doing a bit on weed very soon. And part of the reason is the state monopoly. China has said that China has not had that same cultural China has not had that same cultural collapse in cigarette use. And part of that reason is the state monopoly. If a private cigarette company fights regulation, that is one thing. If the government's own tobacco system fights regulation, that is much harder. Because now the regulator and the seller are living inside the same structure. That is the core of this topic. What happens when life breaks down, when there is systemic contradiction? A government tells people smoking is dangerous. The same government collects hundreds of billions from smoking. Their own president, Xi Jinping, quit smoking. The state does not quit the cigarette business. Younger people smoke less, older people smoke more, the world cuts back, China sells more. That is the story. And the numbers are huge. China, 1.4 billion people, India, 1.5 billion people, 300 million smokers in your nation. If cigarette sales around the world are down 25%, how is it that cigarette sales in China are up 40% over 2 decades? And this is no small business. $244 billion in profit and tax revenue for the Chinese government. So the question here is simple. Can China seriously fight smoking while depending on cigarette money? And if the government makes money every time someone buys a pack, who is watching out for the smoker? All right, next topic. The Treasury Department has prepared a design for a proposed $250. The Treasury Department has prepared a design for a proposed $250 bill featuring Donald Trump. That does not mean the bill is legal yet. It does not mean it is going into circulation tomorrow. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the department is preparing in case Congress authorizes it. That is the key. Congress would have to act. Do you think they will? Current federal law says only the portrait of a deceased individual may appear on United States currency and securities. Trump, of course, is alive. So under current law, he cannot simply be placed on a US bill. That means a $250 Trump bill would require Congress to change the law or create an exception. The proposal is tied to America's 250th anniversary. The country turns 250 this year, counting from the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So the symbolism is obvious. A $250 bill for 250 years. But this is not only about currency. It is about inflation, national memory, political power, and Trump's desire and Trump's overwhelming desire to write himself into the American history books while he is still alive. Now let's start with the currency argument. The largest regular bill currently issued in the United States is the $100 bill. The government issues $1, $2, $5, $10, $20, $50, and $100 notes. The United States used to have larger bills, $500, $1,000, $5,000, and $10,000. Those were discontinued in 1969 because they were not used much by the public. So a $250 bill would be unusual. It would be a new denomination. It would be tied to a living president. And it would require a legal change. It would also arrive at a moment when inflation has already changed how people think about money. The penny is already being phased out because it costs more to make than it's worth. A penny costs several cents to produce. A nickel costs more than a nickel to produce. So even the coins are telling us something. The smallest denominations are becoming economically irrational. The dollar buys less every year. The $100 bill does not feel as powerful as it used to. So yes, there is a practical conversation about higher denominations. But that is separate from putting Trump's face on the bill. If the country needs a higher denomination because of inflation, why not restore the $500 bill? Why not redesign the $100 bill? Why not create a $200 bill with a historical figure who has already been judged by time? Why does the new bill need to feature the current living president? That is the question here. Now, of course, there's some history here. A few living people appeared on US currency during the Civil War era, including Abraham Lincoln and Salmon Chase. But Congress moved to ban living people from appearing on currency after abuses and self-promotion controversies. That is why the modern rule exists. It is not random. It protects public money from becoming a personality shrine. Money is not a campaign poster. Money circulates throughout history. It passes through grocery stores, banks, pockets, cash registers, churches, restaurants, and small businesses. Putting someone on money is one of the strongest forms of national memory. That is why this matters. George Washington on the $1 bill, Abraham Lincoln on the $5 bill and the penny, Alexander Hamilton on the $10 bill, Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill, Ulysses Grant on the $50 bill, Benjamin Franklin is on the $100 bill. These are not just portraits, they are a country telling itself who belongs in the national story. So if Trump appears on the $250 bill while he is alive, that is not just commemoration. That is a political decision about memory before history has time to settle it. And this fits into a broader pattern. Trump has always understood branding. Before politics, he put his name on buildings, hotels, golf courses, products, licensing deals, and projects he did not always fully own. The name itself became the asset. Now that very instinct is moving into government space. Look at the pattern. The proposed $250 Trump bill, Trump accounts for children, the attempted Trump-Kennedy Senate, the attempted Trump-Kennedy Senator renaming, the proposed 250-foot triumphal arch in Washington. The Gulf of America renaming, the restoration of Mount McKinley as the federal name for Denali, and the broader effort to reshape Washington through monuments, buildings, events, and national systems and national symbols. The Kennedy Center update matters. A federal judge just ruled that Trump's name must be removed from the Kennedy Center because the center cannot be renamed without congressional approval. The judge said Congress controls the name. Trump responded by backing away from the renovation fight and talking about transferring control back to Congress. So even there, the court drew a line. You cannot just take a nationally established institution. You cannot nas- you cannot just take a nationally you cannot just take a nationally established institution and attach your name to it because your people control the board. That's the issue. This arch that he's thinking about building, it's planned at about 250 feet tall. That would be much taller than the Lincoln Memorial, which is about 100 feet tall. It would also be taller than the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, which is about 160 feet tall. The arch is supposed to mark the 250th anniversary, but people are already calling it the Arc de Trump. Is this about architecture? This questions the intention. Is this about America's 250th birthday? Or is this about one man making himself permanent in stone, steel, currency, institutions, and public memory? The vanity is astonishing. The glorification of his name is almost anti-leader to me. It's okay to want to be remembered, but to place your name on assets, government assets, things that we will use in our everyday lives for you to be remembered, what does that say about the human being? Is that the leader that you want? I mean, I'm struggling to understand what his agenda is. Is it about his legend? Or is it about serving the American constituency? And above all else, it's just all vanity. And you will read it in the holy books, you will read it in scripture, you will hear it from the wisest. What is vanity? It means nothing. Yet our president is consumed by it. It's shocking. It's okay if Congress wanted to move forward with putting his name on a prospective bill. That's totally fine. But we've seen it time and time again that he wants to be remembered, not only as the greatest president to ever live, but as a great leader, as someone who was benevolent and helped change American history. He absolutely did change our history. But is there an overwhelming majority of people that want to have his name placed on many of the things that they see, especially government-owned assets? If someone protects America, history will remember them. If someone serves this country, the country will decide how to honor them. But when a living president pushes his name into buildings, accounts, monuments, maps, and now money, the question becomes, is he trying to protect America or trying to protect his legend? Because those are not the same thing. If the country chooses to remember you, that is history. If you force your name into every national symbol while you are still in power, that is something else entirely. That is glorification of yourself. And depending on your religious or moral view, the glorification in the glorification of man is dangerous. It asks citizens to treat political leadership like permanent personal greatness. That is not how a republic is supposed to work. A republic should be bigger than one person. Its currency should be bigger than one person. Its monuments and national anniversary should be bigger than one president. A president who spent A man who has spent his life licensing his name and now wants that name inside national memory. So the question is not just, should America have a $250 bill? It's, should a living president be allowed to place himself on the country's money before we have had a chance to settle his account? And if history will remember him anyway, why does he need his name on everything today? Okay, next topic. Trump accounts are now live. The Treasury Department launched the app on May 28th, 2026. The accounts officially start being funded on July 4th, 2026. Eligible children born from January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2028 can receive a $1,000 federal seed deposit. Children under 18 who are U.S. citizens with valid Social Security numbers can have Trump accounts open for them. Parents, guardians, employers, charities, and others can contribute. Annual private contributions are capped around $5,000. The accounts are tax advantaged and designed to invest in low-cost broad market index funds. Parents can get started through the app, trumpaccounts.gov, or the IRS Form 4547 with ID.me. Nearly 6 million children have already been signed up. Roughly 67 million eligible children have not. That is the first number. So nearly 6 million in, about 67 million still out. This is not a tiny program. If it scales, it could be one of the biggest efforts in American history to expose children to the stock market early. Now compare this to Social Security. Social Security was built around a different model. Workers pay payroll taxes during their working years. That money helps fund benefits for retirees, disabled workers, and survivors. People working today fund people retired today. Then when today's workers retire, the next generation funds them. That system has helped keep millions of elderly Americans out of poverty. But of course, Social Security is under pressure. The main retirement trust fund is projected to pay full scheduled benefits until 2033. After that, if Congress does nothing about it, incoming revenue would cost about 77% of scheduled benefits. The combined Social Security trust funds are projected to last until around 2034, after which continuing income would cover about 81% of scheduled benefits. So when people say Social Security is running out of money, that needs context. It does not mean Social Security disappears. It means the trust fund reserves are projected to run down and benefits would be cut unless Congress changes taxes, benefits, retirement age, or some combination. So that is the backdrop for Trump accounts. Trump accounts do not replace Social Security. They do not fix Social Security. A $1,000 child investment account does not solve a retirement system covering tens of millions of people. but it does represent a different philosophy. Social Security is back-end protection, whereas Trump accounts are front-end ownership. Whereas Trump accounts are front-end ownership. Social Security helps later in life. Trump accounts start the investment clock at childhood. That is the difference, and time is the whole point.
What does this mean? Well, Scott, it's taken us 4 years to get here. Great to be here with you guys. But today, the Invest America Trump Account app launches in both the Google and the Apple app stores. Remember, this is a Treasury account app, totally trustworthy, like Social Security. It's going to be here for a very long time. You need to make sure that every child you know, if you have friends who have children, make sure that every child goes and family goes and downloads this app at either of the app stores, okay? Every child under 2, remember, is going to get $1,000 automatically funded on July 4th. Most kids between the age of 2 and 10 will get at least $250. If they're in a state like Connecticut, they'll get $500, or Indiana, they'll get $500. And kids between the age of 10 and 18 get a free lifetime 401k, right, that they can compound in, where employers are going to be adding money into those accounts, etc. There's no investment decision for the parents to make. All the money that goes into these accounts will be invested in the best 500 companies in America. They will be direct shareholders, a little bit of NVIDIA, a little bit of Microsoft, a little bit of Walmart, all the companies that you talk about every day. We're going to get all the people who have felt left out and left behind, what the president calls the Main Street agenda. Every kid on every rural block or every rural street and city block is now going to be a direct shareholder in the upside of America. You and I talked about it 4 years ago. Today is another huge milestone in making this a reality.
You're still pounding the pavement, so to speak, too. I mean, you mentioned what's happening in Indiana, your home state, for those who don't know. On the state level, this has a chance to be pretty significant, too, for those that are going to contribute as well. This is not just a federal thing that we are going to talk about. Tell me more about that, because I'm not sure people fully understand that.
So imagine this is a private investment account for every child in America. Anybody can contribute to. Moms and dads can add $5 or $10. Employers can add money to. Philanthropists can add money to. If you start with $1,000 and just add $50 a month, that's $50,000 at 18. That's $175,000 at age 30. So I'll give you an example. I was in Durham, North Carolina on Friday. The mayor of Durham, Leo Williams, wants to get all 40,000 kids in Durham signed up for these Trump accounts. So he's threw a big event. I adopted the city, or the school, Murray Massenburg, 700 elementary school kids, and I'm putting an extra $250 into all of their accounts. I just talked to the principal. I said, if you get them all signed up, you tell me the amount of money that I need to send you, and you can deliver it via a QR code directly into the accounts of each of those kids. Everybody in America can do this for their local school. You just raise a little bit of money, you give it to the principal, and the principal transfers it into these individual accounts. So think of this as an open source way for every community in America to get their kids off to a great start.
Yeah, amazing. You keep us up to date on all of that as we run right up to the deadline. And they do have a countdown clock here on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, which you probably saw when you were last with us on the Cerebras IPO day. Let's talk some stocks, because when you were last.
I love the idea. What do you think about it? It's going to cost us about $15 billion in taxpayer money until 2024. Hey, listen, I don't know where our taxpayer dollars go anyway. Right? It's just some imaginary fund out there. So when they're saying that $15 billion is going to be given to our children right at the outset when they're born, even retroactively, and they will get exposure to the stock market as an indirect result of this, I think this is a great idea, because I think the entire world should be invested in the stock market. I may be mistaken about that as far as how capitalism and all this crap works, but my premise here is that this is how you build wealth. Investing in the long term, investing in companies that are now, as a matter of fact, your company. You buy a stock like NVIDIA or Microsoft, you are an owner. This gives children a piece of the pie. And it gives them skin in the game. And this also supplements the issue of our money running out in Social Security. So Social Security is back-end protection. Trump accounts are front-end ownership. Social Security helps later in life when we retire. Trump accounts start the investment clock at childhood. A baby has something a 40-year-old does not have: runway. If a child gets $1,000 upfront and a family adds $50 a month for 18 years, total contributions are $12,000. At a 10% return, which is the average of the S&P 500 annually, it grows to roughly $36,000. So with strong returns or a slightly higher monthly contribution, you can get close to $50,000 by adulthood. The exact number depends on market returns, of course, but the concept is powerful. A child starts with ownership. A child sees the compounding. A child grows up knowing the stock market is not just something rich people talk about. That changes psychology. It affects all of the babies born across the entire nation. America has a stock market ownership gap. People with 401ks, brokerage accounts, pensions, home equity, and index funds participate in asset growth. People without assets get hit by inflation, but do not benefit as much from rising markets. That is how inequality compounds itself. If prices rise and you own nothing, inflation attacks you. You are losing about 3% of your purchasing power on an annual basis. If prices rise and you own productive assets, you may at least participate in the growth. If you're invested in the stock market today and you're gaining 10%, your real rate of growth would be 7% after accounting for 3% of inflation. This is why Trump accounts matter. They give every eligible child a starting point, not a guarantee, not a fortune, not a replacement for wages, education, family stability, housing, or healthcare, not even Social Security, but a starting point. Now, what about the birth rate in the United States? The United States had 3.6 million births in 2025. That was down about 1% from 2024. The US fertility rate remains near historic lows. Could a $1,000 account incentivize people to have children? Probably not by itself. No serious family is having a child because of $1,000. Childcare alone costs thousands of dollars per year. Housing, food, healthcare, clothes, time, sleep, stress. That all costs much more than that. But the program can still matter symbolically. It tells families that a child should begin life with an asset. It gives parents a structure, employers a way to contribute, philanthropists a vehicle. And it gives the country a way to normalize child ownership of the market. That is the bigger idea here. Get them started early, have them understand that they have an asset that is producing growth, it is compounding interest. But of course, there are criticisms also clear here. Families with more money can contribute more. A child from a wealthier household may get $1,000 plus every year. A child from a struggling household may only get the $1,000. So a program that democratizes access can still widen gaps if contributions are unequal. However, let's come back to the premise here. Universal seed money helps everyone. If you want your tax dollars going anywhere, I would think it would go to a cause like this. Extra contributions help the families that can afford them. So if the goal is real wealth building for all children, the design matters. Should enrollment be automatic? Should lower income children get matching contributions? Should employers be encouraged to contribute? Should states add money? These details matter, and they may be refined in years to come. But the Social Security comparison gives the topic weight. Social Security is a floor. Trump accounts are a starting line. Social Security is funded by payroll taxes. Trump accounts are funded by a federal seed deposit and private contributions. Social Security protects old age. Trump accounts try to build early ownership. One helps people when they are older. The other tries to start compounding before a person can even work. And that is the point. if Social Security is under pressure, if inflation punishes cash, if asset ownership separates the people who get ahead from the people who fall behind, then why would we not want every child to start with a stake? That does not mean the program is perfect. It does not mean the branding is not political. This $1,000 contribution does not solve structural inequality. But it is a serious idea, and I think a good one. A child with an investment account is exposed to capitalism differently. They are not only a worker in the future, they are an owner from the beginning. That is the strongest argument here. It is a doorway into asset ownership. And in America, ownership is one of the dividing lines between people who get crushed by inflation and people who participate in growth. So if Social Security was built to protect people at the end of life, we are now switching gears here and becoming more proactive to have America create the building blocks for children at the beginning of life. Okay, next topic. Jean Carroll, DOJ scrutiny, and the question of retribution. Now, this story has to be framed carefully. Jean Carroll accused Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her in a Manhattan department store in the 1990s. Trump denied the allegation. Carroll sued him. In 2023, a jury found Trump liable for sexual abuse and defamation and awarded Carroll $5 million. In 2024, another jury awarded Carroll about $83 million in a separate defamation case. Together, the civil verdicts total about $88 million. Trump is now appealing. Now, the Justice Department is investigating the funding connected to Carroll's lawsuits. The new reporting says the probe is focused on American Future Republic, a nonprofit backed by LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman. The Chicago U.S. Attorney's Office denied that it opened a criminal investigation into Carroll herself. That distinction, of course, matters. The topic is not simply about Carroll is being charged. She is not charged. The issue is that the DOJ is examining the outside funding connected to her litigation against Trump. The dispute comes after a 2022 deposition. Carroll reportedly said that no one else was paying for her legal fees. Later, her lawyers disclosed that some legal expenses were supported by a nonprofit backed by Reid Hoffman. So the questions are specific. Was Carroll's deposition answer false? If it was false, did she know it was false? Was it material to the case? Was it corrected? Did the judge already deal with it? Did the appeals court already consider it? And why is the Justice Department looking at it now? That is where the political question enters. One side says, if someone lies under oath, investigate it. Perjury matters. Civil litigation depends on truthful testimony, does it not? And of course, legal funding can affect credibility. If there was obstruction, money laundering, or false testimony, the DOJ should examine it. That is the accountability argument. The other side says, and this is the whole point of this topic, the other side says, of course, this looks like retaliation. Carroll accused Trump. Carroll won. Trump was ordered to pay about $88 million. Now, under Trump, the Justice Department is investigating the funding network behind her case. That creates an appearance problem even if prosecutors say they have a legal basis. The question is not only whether the DOJ can justify the question is not only whether the DOJ can the question is not only whether the DOJ can justify the investigation. The question is whether the same standard would apply to anyone else. Would the Department of Justice normally open a criminal probe over a funding disclosure issue in an ordinary civil lawsuit? What do you think? Probably not. But if there's $88 million at stake, a president's reputation, I would think, yes, the DOJ would go after anyone that Trump is involved with. I don't even think he has to tell the DOJ anymore. Almost everyone serving in his cabinet and around him are considered to be Trump loyalists. They are going to do not only what is best in the they are going to do what is in the best interest of the president. Full stop. I don't think the court of public opinion would deny that. Would this be handled through cross-examination, sanctions, appeals, or a criminal investigation? Would this be happening if Carroll had not beaten Trump in court? That's the public trust question. And of course, this is not happening in isolation. Trump has repeatedly targeted critics, adversaries, and institutions he believes wronged him. James Comey has been a repeated target of Trump's anger and legal threats. Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, who brought the civil fraud case against Trump, has faced federal scrutiny and prosecution efforts. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, has faced legal pressure over classified information issues. Adam Schiff has been targeted with mortgage-related allegations. Lisa Cook has faced mortgage-related scrutiny, whilst Trump and his allies criticized her role at the Federal Reserve. Now, not every case is identical. Some may involve legitimate questions. Some may involve legitimate legal questions. Some may collapse. Some may never become charges. Some may be dismissed. But the pattern is the point. If a president's critics repeatedly become targets of federal investigations, the country has to ask whether the Justice Department is enforcing the law evenly or being used as a political weapon. And by the way, we are funding the Department of Justice. It is our money that pays their salaries. That question cuts both ways. A president's opponent should not be immune from investigation, but a president's personal enemy should not be investigated because they are an enemy. That is the line. That is where we should draw the line. Lest we forget, Trump just settled his lawsuit with the IRS, where now he is immune from being targeted by an audit retroactively. The law firm context also matters. Early in Trump's second term, his administration pressured major law firms with executive orders, investigations, security clearance threats, federal contract concerns, and access restrictions. Some firms fought back in court. Other firms cut deals. Nine major law firms reportedly agreed to provide about $940 million in pro bono legal work tied to administration-backed causes. Paul Weiss agreed to about $40 million. Skadden agreed to about $100 million. Milbank, $100 million. Wilkie Farr, $100 million. Cadwalader, $100 million. Kirkland and Ellis, Latham and Watkins, A&O Shearman, and Simpson Thatcher were each reported around $125 million. That is close to $1 billion in legal commitments. So when the Carroll funding issue comes up, the comparison is unavoidable. Reid Hoffman-backed money helped fund litigation against Trump. Trump attacks that as improper. At the same time, major law firms made massive pro bono commitments after pressure from Trump's own administration. So what accounts as improper legal funding? A billionaire helped fund a lawsuit against Trump. Law firms pledging hundreds of millions of dollars in work after pressure from Trump? I mean, what's going on here? Or does the answer depend on who benefits? That is the systemic contradiction. If outside funding helped Carroll pursue litigation against a powerful man, is that corruption or access to justice? If law firms pledge hundreds of millions of dollars after pressure from a president, is that public service or coerced alignment? If the Department of Justice investigates one side but not the other, is that even-handed enforcement? Carroll won about $88 million in civil verdicts. The funding issue involves Reid Hoffman-backed American Future Republic. The probe appears focused on the nonprofit, not Carroll herself. Of course, no criminal charges have been filed against Carroll, but perjury requires more than a wrong answer. It requires a knowingly false statement under oath about something material. That is a high bar. The political layer is unavoidable because the Justice Department is supposed to belong to the country, not to the president's personal grievance list. If there is real financial misconduct, show the evidence. If this is retaliation, it is unacceptable. And we've seen the president do this time and time again. The Department of Justice is his own personal weapon. Does this seem politically motivated to you? Or any of these other lawsuits that he's brought about these people? These lawsuits are superfluous at best. They truly look selective. We even created a term for this, lawfare. Real statutes only apply to selected enemies. And this looks like core political retribution to me. Except in this case, it is a sitting president, the most powerful man on earth, with the most resources, including the money. You want to call this accountability? Or do you want to call a spade a spade? This is retaliation at best for the $88 million that she won legally. All right, next topic. Get this banner up over here. All right, y'all. If you haven't been paying attention to the market, there is an AI boom going on. We all know that much. And it looks like memory chips are the 2026 winner. Every year, investors try to look for the winners. Every calendar year, we try to see which sectors are going to do the best, which are going to advance more, which are going to potentially regress. Now, the calendar year does not really matter if you are a long-term investor. A true investor is thinking in years, not months. But Wall Street still moves in yearly themes. So every year, investors ask the same thing. What is working? What is leading? What is market rewarding? Which sector has earnings momentum? Which companies have pricing power? Which theme is getting stronger instead of weaker? Coming into 2026, people were watching several themes. Would the Magnificent Seven keep leading? Would energy bounce back? Would industrials advance? Would data centers drive another leg of the AI trade? Would earnings stay strong? And would the physical build-out finally catch up to the software story? And now we are in June 2026, and the market has started giving us an answer. The broad indexes are at or near record highs. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq have been pushing records daily. The Dow has also been moving into record territory. Earnings have been strong. AI optimism is still driving the market. But the cleanest winner inside the AI thesis this year has not just been the Magnificent Seven. It has been memory. It has been the physical infrastructure low. And more broadly, it has been the physical infrastructure build out behind AI. Micron crossed the $1 trillion market value. Micron crossed the $1 trillion market value for the first time this year. It is now trading around $1.1 trillion. It became one of the fastest companies ever to move from $500 billion to $1 trillion in market value. That move happened in about 48 days. NVIDIA took much longer to make that same jump. That tells you the speed of the repricing. SK Hynix also crossed $1 trillion. Samsung remains a memory giant. SanDisk has been one of the most explosive stocks in the market this year. Now let's look at some numbers. Micron year to date is up 655 points, and that equates to 207%. In the last year, it is up 889%. In the last 5 years, it is up 1,059%. Let's take a look at SanDisk. Year to date, up 515%. Last 12 months, up 4,440%. Last 5 years, up 4,524%. Now, of course, if you want to jump into this sector, buy ETFs, SMH will give you exposure to all of these companies. It is the best pure way to play. So this is not just one random stock moving. It's the global repricing of memory. So what is memory? A processor does the calculation. Memory holds and feeds the data. AI models need huge amounts of data moving quickly between chips. If the GPU is the engine, memory is the fuel line. If memory is too slow, the expensive GPU waits. If storage cannot keep up, the data center bottlenecks. If supply is tight, prices rise. That is the memory thesis. AI is not just about compute, it is about feeding the compute. Training a model requires massive data movement. Running a model requires fast access to data. Serving millions of users requires storage, retrieval, caching, and constant movement of information. That is why high bandwidth memory matters. That is why DRAM matters and NAND matters. This all comes back to storage. Memory isn't glamorous. It is not the chatbot. It is not the app. It is not the thing that the consumer sees, but memory is part of the bedrock. And right now, that is where the money is moving to. Memory prices have surged. Reuters reported that memory prices doubled in the first quarter and were expected to rise as much as 60% in the second quarter. That is not normal pricing pressure. That is a shortage signal. AI data centers are pulling memory supply away from other industries. That affects smartphones, laptops, gaming consoles, automobiles, and anything that needs memory. Oh, by the way, we have 3 major IPOs coming up this year: SpaceX, Anthropic, and OpenAI. Where do you think we're going to get the money to fund these IPOs from? There's going to continue to be rotations. Investors have been pulling their money out of defensive sectors like staples and putting them in these memory names because this is where the highest growth is. Sony and Nintendo have already felt pressure from higher memory costs. That shows you that the AI boom is not isolated. It bleeds into everything. Now, that is how infrastructure cycles work. At first, people see the product. They see ChatGPT, AI images, agents, NVIDIA, data centers. We start hearing things about power demand, memory, storage, and cooling. But the AI thesis has layers, and layer 1 is compute. That is NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom, custom chips, GPUs, and accelerators. Layer 2 is memory. That is Micron, SK Hynix, Samsung, SanDisk, Western Digital, Seagate, DRAM, NAND, HBM, enterprise storage. Layer 3 is the semiconductor equipment that includes the companies making the tools needed to manufacture advanced chips. Layer 4 is data center infrastructure. That means servers, networking, fiber, cooling, power management, electrical systems, and high-performance interconnects. And layer 5 is the physical build-out. That means industrials, construction firms, electrical contractors, utilities, grid equipment, and the companies literally breaking the ground. That's why you see a company like Caterpillar, and we'll jump to that stock right now. They've been one of the winners this year. Year to date alone, 46%. Now again, if you are trying to invest in the AI thesis, specifically semiconductors, just hit SMH. You're up 60% year over year. You need not look any further. Because what happens here, now, of course, this ETF would collapse if potentially memory chips become cyclical. But what would happen here if all of a sudden we have some breakthrough in our technology and memory chips now need 1/5 of the capacity? We're going to need less memory, are we not? It's the same thing with GPUs, CPUs. So you have that same type of risk in NVIDIA. However, right now it is full on growth. Shoot first, ask questions later. This is the primary winner in the AI thesis. And more importantly, and I get this from the book A Random Walk Down Wall Street, you want to invest in the thesis that you believe in, right? So if you believe that we are going to have some futuristic society, then you would be investing in the building blocks of that thesis, which is SMH, AIPO. This is an ETF where 50% of any one company's revenue comes from artificial intelligence and power infrastructure. They're up 42% year to date. And if you believe in this, again, just put your money into ETFs. A Random Walk Down Wall Street. I just finished the book. Again, the synthesis of that book is, in the long run, a stock picker will not beat out ETFs. It just will not happen. The evidence is, the book is filled with evidence for decades of different investment funds just not being able to beat the market. Because again, the thesis always changes, right? That's why, at the outset of this topic, we started by discussing, who are the winners for this year? So coming into 2026, everybody said, would it be the Mag 7? And the Mag 7 has underperformed somewhat. They're catching up now, but Mag 7, a gun. Apple is at an all-time high. Microsoft has lagged. Amazon is at an all-time high. Google's at an all-time high. Tesla is now at an all-time high. Meta has lagged and fallen behind. And then Nvidia, of course, has made all-time highs, but has somewhat lagged. So if you're going to play in this space and you do believe in the AI thesis, I certainly do. I believe that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Just invest in the ETFs. In the long run, you will win out. And you may be able to generate alpha, which is the difference between a potential incremental return and the stock market benchmark, which is 10%, right? The S&P 500. If you're trying to generate alpha, which is anything over 10%, you may be able to generate alpha through these tertiary ETFs. But right now they're becoming primary. SMH, I mean, this is probably received the most inflows this year. I mean, year to date, it's up 60%. So if you would have allocated maybe 20 or 30% of your portfolio into something like SMH, you'd be 60% up on the year, respectively, of course. This is a chart of SMH's holdings: NVIDIA, Broadcom, Marvell, Synopsys, Qualcomm, the entire value chain, Lam Research, Applied Materials. You're going to hit it all here. So when people say AI, they often mean software. But AI is also physical. It needs land, electricity, chips, servers, cooling, fiber, storage, memory. Right now, memory is where the shortage is showing up in price. That is why these stocks have exploded. Now investors have to be careful. Investors have to be careful. Memory is historically cyclical. That word matters. Cyclical means the business can boom when demand is hot and supply is tight, then fall when supply catches up or demand weakens. Memory companies have had brutal cycles before. Prices rise, companies expand supply, supply catches up, margins compress, stocks fall. That is the risk. So the question is not whether memory is important. It is the AI winner this year. The question is whether this is a normal memory upcycle or the beginning of a multi-year memory supercycle tied to AI infrastructure. That is the debate. And if AI demand keeps absorbing capacity faster than the industry can build it, memory will stay tight. If supply catches up faster than expected, of course the stocks can get hit. Both things can be true. The thesis can be real, the stocks can still be volatile. But if you believe in the future, the entry points of course matter, timing always matters. But if you're investing for the long run, just get exposure to SMH. You can buy the S&P 500. Just get broad exposure to the market where the biggest AI winners already carry major weight. A more concentrated semiconductor option is SMH. That gives more direct exposure to the chip ecosystem. The technology sector option is XLK. That gives exposure to large cap technology names, including companies tied to the AI build-out. Of course, you have to know your own risk, your own time horizon. How much money you are willing to invest. Take account your age and what your max drawdown you're willing to allow would be. I mean, if your account is down 30%, are you going to be able to sleep at night? And keep this in your back pocket. Only buy stocks that if you know you could never check the price of them again after buying them, you would feel comfortable in doing so. The investing principle is important. Cash loses purchasing power over time. Inflation is real. If money sits while prices rise, that money is falling behind. That is why we invest, not just to get rich, to protect purchasing power, to participate in growth, to own a piece of the systems shaping the future. And again, I believe in fifth element theory, Star Wars theory. We are going to have a super futuristic society, an electrified world. If we can, magnetic systems all over. But right now, the market is saying that memory is one of those systems. The AI thesis is not a one-year story. This is going to go on, I think, for about 30 years, at least. It is going to be a long infrastructure build-out. Once upon a time, America had dirt roads. Then everything was paved. Communication was analog. Then everything became digital. Computing lived on local machines. Then it moved to the cloud. Now intelligence itself is becoming the infrastructure. If that is true, the question is not only who builds the apps, the question is who owns the rails underneath the apps? Who owns the chips, the memory, the power, the data centers, the grid equipment? Who owns the bottleneck? That is why memory matters. AI needs brains, but brains need memory. The companies building the intelligence matter. The companies feeding the intelligence matter too. And in 2026, memory has become one of the cleanest winners inside the broader AI thesis. Do yourself a favor, jump in while it's hot. This is going to go on, I believe, for the next 30 years. You can completely change your trajectory and fortunes by taking part in this AI thesis. All you have to do is buy the broader market indexes. Thanks for watching.